Live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore. And live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're live in a constant state of fear and misery. No, you're me anymore.
Hello, everybody. We're bringing you Black Digest number 141 on Wednesday, November 21st at Black Height 550,983. So what is up?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's just a bright, sunny day. I'm like getting the day started. You sound a little bit more like your day's not just getting started. Like, usually you have that morning pep. Sounds like you're a little bit chilled out today. But that's all right, man. It's good to be back. I know that listening to that Fear and Misery theme song this morning, that just really has some significance. How you doing today, guys?
I should be drunk right now, but I'm not.
Fear and misery in corporate culture. I just want to say that for those of you who have to work in an office, I feel so bad for you. And I hope that one day you can be set free.
Yes, please. Oh, those office jobs. Get outside, enjoy the life.
So Nopar, how is it right next to me?
Yes, so my project right now is working on Shinobi. I already convinced him to close the toilet seat like a real man because of the snakes.
Oh my god.
Oh, man.
Next step is making him use Windows.
Never gonna happen.
I don't think that's gonna happen. Yeah, getting the toilet seat down, that must have been a hard one, man.
Yeah, it's why would you do that? Why? I don't need to do that.
Well, I mean, not to continue this gross topic, but I did once hear that, like, if you leave the seat open, there's a greater chance that nasty particles from the toilet, like, escape and go into the air and then make everything else in the bathroom nasty.
Yeah, you can't get too into that topic because then you're gonna
microwaves.
There's no way to store your toothbrush without. Oh yeah, I used to be a germaphobe. I gave that up though. You can never be 100% clean. Supposed to build that floor up anyway. But yeah, let's switch topics, man. What's been going on since we've been gone? A lot. What's been going on, man?
Yeah, like we should probably explain what happened on the day of the soap opera fork last week. Shinobi, would you like to tell our viewers what happened?
Oh my god, popcorn moment after popcorn moment. The Hashwar, it was a blockbuster flop. Everything has gone south.
Wait, but Shinobi, you did not witness that. How do you know that happened? Because you were asleep.
Hey, I have Wi-Fi. I know how to log into an airport Wi-Fi.
You were in an you were not in an airport on the day of the BCash fork.
I was on my way to one. No, wait, no. I'm lying now. I'm just confusing the days. Time zones don't make any sense anymore.
It doesn't matter because the updates have just kept coming.
So what, I mean, in short, what was supposed to happen, or what 2 out of 3 of us were planning to do, not me, I'm the third that did not want to do it, but there's supposed to be a live stream on the day of the fork, which was what every single other crypto YouTube channel was doing, and I was dreading the hours as they were going by, and I was like, this is going to happen. And then it turns out that Shinobi slept through the whole thing and we didn't get to go on air. And Chris made popcorn and everything.
Well, it didn't matter. Like, yeah, I thought about it. I think I woke up for a second and then I said, I don't care in my head. And I went back to sleep. I mean, like, as much as Like some of us wanted to do that, and even I did initially. I mean, just look at all of the streams that actually happened. I mean, it was just constant, pointless circle jerking, grabbing every random like D-list crypto celebrity to see what they thought in the moment, looking at everything with no information. And it's like, what's the point of that? Like that, it's a waste of time.
I hear that our favorite Australian got to show off some expensive watches.
Oh yeah.
That's about it. But yeah, I was very happy with the outcome of Shinobi's sleeve schedule disrupting that original plan, the original vision for Block Digest.
Yeah, to be honest, I was ready for it too, but it was just like, yeah, there's so many streams on. There was slow developments. It's like all you're really doing is watching a block height, and then the whole back and forth battle of game theory and mining, and the economic nodes involved, and all of this hubbub back and forth we've been seeing over the past week just started. I mean, you could do live coverage over the past week or so and also continue on, because I mean, I don't know how much longer this is going to go on, but I'm sure this drama is going to keep going, which we're going to get into later.
I mean, it is what it is, but I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity in the later slots to really dive into all the specifics and the fallout with a lot less wasted airtime. So you guys want to just get to it?
Yeah, let's hit the major high notes. So what's been going on, man?
Well, first off, sure everybody has seen by now that right after the price went, ICE announced that Bakkt is going to be delaying their launch from December 12th to January 24th of next year. And really, like, I've been seeing a lot of claims of market manipulation involving the price and a lot of wild speculation. And like, honestly, I want to kind of like cut through a lot of that and really just get down to the core of what they're saying. And like they've like actually released like a whole spec sheet with like the minimum price movements required, daily price movement limits, of which there are none, which actually kind of surprised me when I saw that, as well as lot specifications and just like the every like detailed thing you would want to know as an actual trader using this contract, like what exact specifications it's going to be set up to follow. And like this, I think shows like this isn't going to be like a lot of the JP Morgan, the Chase, like all the banks headlines where it's like, oh, we're doing something, but no, we're not. Oh, we're doing something. Like they've all of the details fleshed out. And this was very recently published. So they've really gone down into the specific minutia and aren't kind of just hedging their bets with headlines. So as for the reasoning behind the delay, I think it really comes down to really just like one, the CFTC, because they're still with the updated launch date having the caveat of subject to regulatory approval. So they still haven't explicitly got that yet. And that's obviously they're going to have the CFTC sign off on this before it can actually go live. And two, really just all of the back end, like as far as actually managing the crypto assets, like the entire warehousing section of the product that they're going to be setting up, and really making sure that a lot of that's ironed out. Because I've seen like, the first thing I saw of this was just like a tweet I saw where somebody was quoting out of context the comment they made about the demand for the product, and we're just like, oh, institutional demand fizzled out. Like, stop caring about institutions. And when you really look at all the specifics, it's the exact opposite. It's they still have a very high degree of demand, and that's why they're kind of pushing this forward, probably to go through more in depth with the CFTC as they audit everything and actually building out the back end systems. Because especially with the kind of spotlight and the reputation they have, there is really zero margin for error in terms of actually setting up the back end to manage delivery of the Bitcoin at the expiration of a contract and actually housing the private keys in cold storage. And this is like, they really have to cross every T and dot every I, because if something goes wrong after launch with this, like this would cause an immense regulatory fallout in how different agencies would react to this, future requirements going forward. And something going wrong would really drastically change the landscape in terms of any kind of company trying to build an institutional product like this that's fully regulated and on a licensed exchange. So they have zero room to fuck anything up here. And, you know, I'm assuming that a lot of the CFTC and what they're going to be looking at in deciding whether or not to approve this from a regulator's point of view is really going to come down to the specifics of how the system is set up, like how redundant it is, what kind of safeguards are set up, you know, how control of that within the institution of Bakkt is distributed. So like what members of the company have access and what conditions to the Bitcoin in their warehouse facility and things like that, to just kind of show like where the liability stands if anything goes wrong. And then like what kind of checks and balances are set up so that somebody internal to the company couldn't run off and just abscond with all of the Bitcoin, because that is like, moving into this world is obviously a huge part of this. Like you have to have those keys split up among individuals, and those individuals are in a very unique position to just be able to disappear if they choose to run off with the money. And there's really never been on like these types of exchanges a product like this where you can really just press a button, run through a border, and all of that value went with you. So that's probably a huge aspect of what they're looking at. And really the final thing I think is like really going to be a big factor in the CFTC approval, in my opinion, is they've apparently already acquired insurance for all of the funds in the cold storage wallet. So pretty much everything in cold storage in their warehouse is actually insured, I'm assuming just for the equivalent fiat value in the case of any kind of theft or malfeasance. And they're working right now on getting insurance coverage for their hot wallet as well. So I think that's probably another thing that's really holding things up. Like it's, you know, given how new this is moving into this kind of landscape, that's really like all the things the CFTC is going to want to look at. Like, is this insured in the event of a loss because there's such a high risk compared to other things? Will the people who've traded assets or have assets stored with you be covered? And just the entire architecture of the system. And they're definitely going to want to see all of this fleshed out before they give any kind of green light to launch it. And really, I think that like this delay is probably mostly just in getting that system online and then communications with the CFTC to give them a high degree of confidence that Bakkt is really covering all the bases here. Because, you know, like I said, if something were to go wrong with a product like this listed on an actual exchange, like that would really just change everything in terms of other legacy institutions trying to move into this space like this. And so like, I don't at all see this as like, oh, the institutional demand fizzled out because the price dropped $1,000. I see this as a company taking their time, making sure they're doing things right and not just rushing things and fucking it up in the process. Like they have one chance here to do this right. And if they fuck it up, the consequences will be felt by everybody who wants to move into this space in the future.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I mean, you know, there might have been some market moves coming along with this news, and that's where, you know, people want to bring up that kind of story, saying it's, you know, the institutions have decided that it's not worth their time. I think that's far from the truth. I mean, we've been seeing these institutions, you know, even institutions like, you know, South Dakota passing legislation for custody. We've been seeing a lot of like legislation building out the possible things that this sort of setup would need. And I mean, you know, like like this story later, there's been some SEC enforcement recently. You know, these enforcement actions and coming down the line, you don't want that whenever a product like this gets launched from a traditional institution, and then all the other that could bring some, a little bit of hesitations to others trying to get it set up right. And, so yeah, I'm with it being pushed back if they think it wasn't up to speed. I mean, it's possible that, them setting that deadline or saying they were going to release in December maybe brought in some of this action because this enforcement, because, beforehand, there wasn't really any sort of guidance about these tokens listed. And we were starting to see a lot of different exchanges put out their own policies on that. And I mean, even though this is not really supposed to have anything with that, I mean, it's just like you're saying, the CFTC needs to be a little bit clearer on their on what they're going to be, what they need to label this thing correctly, so that it doesn't have really any penalties coming at it or any sort of delays, future delays. But yeah, I mean, I think it's still going to be huge. I mean, like I'm saying, we've seen states work to get the legislation correct to try and advertise that they're wanting to be a part of this system. And I mean, Colorado just elected a governor that's crypto friendly, put forward that crypto bill last year. And there's a lot of stuff going on that's trying to build out this system. And to say that institutional investors have fizzled out is just inaccurate. I mean, the market's emotional. They see things going in a direction. They want to just grab things to try and say that this is why it's happening. And, we were doing this on the way up last year and then on the way back down at the beginning of this year, whenever you see these stories sort of come up to try and, give a reason as to why the market's making a move. But the reality is all that institution investment in trying to advance this ecosystem is still there and strong and moving forward, really. So, I mean, this is just another step moving forward, is a little bit of a delay to make sure that the thing gets put together right.
And I mean, I think like people really don't appreciate like how different this is than things like the CME or the CBOE futures. I mean, like everything we have now on legacy markets is just cash settled contracts following an index. So like that's not actually part of the price discovery mechanism for Bitcoin. Like that is not helping to independently like find the price at any given moment. It's just following it with people kind of making side bets in cash. Like this will actually have its own independent price mechanism, like its own order books. It is physically deliverable. So upon a contract expiring, like people will actually be able to take delivery of real Bitcoin. This isn't just like a side bet going on. Like this is legitimately something that could wind up being a huge pool of liquidity in price discovery for Bitcoin. I mean, like right now you have like exchanges like, Bitfinex has been really the dominant spot market for years now. And, as things really get up and running and it attracts more liquidity, Bakkt and anything like it that follows, like really could start giving existing exchanges a run for their money in terms of like how much of the overall liquidity in the ecosystem moves there to facilitate price discovery.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited for the future of just exchanges setting up these different products. The way they're offered right now, it's a lot of just it hits the blockchain. There's back end stuff where I'm sorry, there's lots of troubles on the back end. It'd just be good when we start to see some of this like Lightning implementation come in for the back end of exchanges and some of these, like the sidechain Liquid and the way that's all going to change the landscape in the future. And, these traditional institutions with a lot of, regulation in place to make sure that people investing in those are fully covered as far as custody, insurance, and everything as far as the hot wallets even. I mean, that's a lot to go over. And once all this stuff keeps moving forward, I think we're going to see the exchanges really kind of, there's those that are really highly regulated. There's those that are really highly technical. And there's those that are just like, the old school, crap coin exchanges. So yeah, I'm excited to see all these developments come on down the line and we start to see, you know, a lot of improvements on the network because of the technological developments that are happening.
So Nopara, Janine, you guys get any thoughts on Big Bad Wall Street? I see you flipping back and forth between the stream and code over there, Nopara.
Yeah, I mean, stop pumping the price. I hope it's gonna crash to 300 and let us build stuff. And when the mainstream is coming in, we are ready.
Yeah, I mean, so the past couple of days, everyone, or I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people, especially those people who bought within the last year or so, have been freaking out about the price dropping. And like a lot of people are saying, when stuff like that happens, you look for someone to blame and what was the reason. The idea being that if you can find someone to blame, you can either punish them or at least you can like prepare in the future if it ever happens again that you don't do this or don't listen to this person or something like that. I am not one of those people who is freaking out. So I do not share those concerns. I'm really sorry if anyone did buy. I've never told anyone to buy. My perspective is actually the opposite, because the lower Bitcoin goes, the more that I get paid. So I'm sorry that I will technically be happy off a situation that might be making a lot of people miserable. But I think we've said from the beginning that this is something that should be looked at on a long-term time scale, and a year is not a long-term time scale in Bitcoin, even though, you know, a year may be all of the time that you have ever been watching this stuff. So I don't really give a shit what institutional investors think, because I'm sorry, you have so much other toys to play with that I don't really care. The people that I care more about are the ones who don't have access to those kinds of systems. So institutional investors, whether they're crying or not, doesn't matter to me. Yeah. So whether their interest has waned or waxed or is going to wax again or is going to wane again, not much difference to me.
All righty. So, Gene, I think we have spent quite a bit of time so far talking about Wall Street. What is going on in crypto land with FUD being thrown around at certain projects, which I seem to see happening more and more lately?
Yes. What is going on in the land of crypto, where crypto means cryptography or encryption? Many of you might have seen, because I think a lot of people who are interested in cryptocurrencies end up also using a lot of encrypted email or encrypted messaging services. So probably a lot of you already know what ProtonMail is. It's one of those hosted encrypted email providers that came out, I think, in 2015 or the end of 2014. I think it was 2015. And on November 15th, there was a bit of a scare that was going around, especially on Twitter, which I found really unfortunate because it was being shared with not a lot of caution or grace by security researchers, or at least people who call themselves security researchers. And basically, like most things on Pastebin, yes, it was on Pastebin. Someone who I don't believe they have identified the person, but they published a message on Pastebin saying that they had hacked ProtonMail, that they were able to hack ProtonMail because ProtonMail had been lying to their users about their security model, and that they would be willing to sell user data on November 23rd, which is now 2 days away, if ProtonMail does not pay their ransom request. And on November 16th, the day after, ProtonMail posted to their subreddit, their own subreddit, with the following statement. As many of you may be aware, earlier today, criminals attempted to extort ProtonMail by alleging a data breach with zero evidence, which was the case. They didn't have any, besides making a list of emails from persons that they claimed to have, there literally was no way to confirm that they had any special knowledge or special access to ProtonMail's infrastructure at any point in time. And so ProtonMail continued. An internal investigation turned up 2 messages from the criminals involved, which again repeated the allegations with zero evidence and demanded payment. We have no indications of any breach from our internal infrastructure monitoring. And towards the end of the statement, thus we believe that this is a hoax and a failed extortion attempt, and there is zero evidence to suggest otherwise. None of the claims made are true, and many of the claims are also unsound from a technical standpoint. One of the claims that I think seemed to be unsound in the way it was presented, but also I think shows that they don't potentially really understand how ProtonMail works, is that they start off the post by blaming basically saying the way they were able to gain access and steal people's passwords in order to get all of their emails is because they say ProtonMail lacks mandatory SRI, which stands for sub-resource integrity. And if anyone doesn't know, that is basically a way of providing endpoint users some kind of method or proof to validate that whatever code they're being served with by a third party, such as a content delivery network, is genuine and hasn't been compromised at any point, in the delivery process. The problem with that is that, for one thing, ProtonMail doesn't use a third-party content delivery network. They host all of their own infrastructure. So that would already be a little bit weird. But the weirdest part is that they make a big deal about mentioning this lack of SRI. Like, I agree that ProtonMail should probably do something with that, but there's a lot of most email providers don't make any kind of effort to do that kind of thing anyway. So I don't know how much value it would have, or that they particularly stand out for not doing more in that area. But the reason I found it weird is that these hackers, or whoever they are posting this message, they blame the lack of SRI, but then they say that they backdoored ProtonMail's infrastructure, and that's how they were serving. That's how they basically put I'm going to quickly look what they said. They basically modified ProtonMail's code and then installed the modified code on their system. So they were basically serving a malicious version of the ProtonMail website or something, which I find strange, because if you're going to go on and on about blaming SRI, the thing is that, if you backdoor ProtonMail systems, that means you could also backdoor, if they had that kind of validation system set up, you could also backdoor that too. So I don't see how exactly there's so much blame on the SRI part. It just doesn't make much sense to me. The other thing that's not really a technical criticism, but more about how they wrote the post, is that they make some very big claims about the kinds of data that they have. They claim to have details regarding circumvention of the Geneva Convention, underwater drone activities in the Pacific Ocean, possible international treaty violations in Antarctica, and they also use, classic attention grabber words like pedophile and stuff like that, which is, that's when you're, anything related to pedophiles is usually common when people make these kinds of ransom attempts. And ProtonMail, like I said, they already responded, and they explained how they don't think the hacker really understands their system in the description. And I'm not, based on the fact that they have had these kinds of social media ransomware extortion attempts before, where people just post messages saying they've compromised it and that they demand money. This is not the first time this has happened, so I'm not particularly confident that this is going to be a problem. But as Nadeem said, Nadeem is the creator of CryptoCat, and he was saying that this was a convincing narrative to him. A lot of people did not think that was the case, but regardless, he is, I guess, a security researcher more than I am. So I guess we'll find out on the 23rd. But to be honest, I'm not convinced by this scaremongering, and I don't think people should be worried. A lot of people have already written posts about why this is probably not going to be a problem. But if you are worried, I mean, these kinds of things, it's always a good time when these kinds of messages are posted to just take a moment to do a security check of your online accounts, regardless of whether you think the threat is credible, because maybe at some point in the future it could be, and you have to be able to, you know, be aware of how you could possibly mitigate that threat. One of the things that you could do, regardless of whether using, you know, a hosted email provider that's encrypted or not, is to use your own keys that are stored locally and not rely on whatever encryption process the hosted email provider is using, because that way, if there is something wrong with how they implemented their system, then the worst that happens is they'll get maybe metadata of your emails, obviously, but the content of the emails will still be controlled by your own key, which means that if a hacker did want to compromise users of an encrypted email service, they would have to hack every individual person. Now, obviously, it's possible that they could put a vulnerability in the malicious code that they are serving you in order to grab your passwords for your hosted email, but that's a lot more complicated, and there obviously you can mitigate that as well. So that's one of the things you could do, and just, you know, changing your passwords to something that's more secure, especially if your passwords are not good, is a good idea. It won't help in this case, obviously, but in the future, it's always good to make sure that you have good passwords and things like that. So I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on whether they think this is even credible. I debated even bringing it up because I don't think it's credible, and I talked about it last week. But I thought it was important to bring it up because I feel like this kind of thing, I'm actually surprised that this kind of thing hasn't happened more with cryptocurrency exchanges, because obviously that has a bigger monetary incentive attached to it for people to make those kinds of claims.
Yeah,
They
that
just don't
might
talk
be.
about it.
Yeah, they don't talk about it, and yeah, we might see some public ransoms posted pay spin in the future. Because I mean, like, yeah, this I don't know. It seems like there's always this back and forth of trying to scare people away from services that offer encryption, and I mean, I've heard it come around before where, you know, people say like ProtonMail, you know, there's some problems with the back end there. You know, it's not exactly secure. You should use PGP. I mean, like, you know, like you're saying, it's a good thing to bring up as like a reminder to update your passwords. You know, you can use stronger security by you know, hashing your message before you even put it in ProtonMail itself. And so you know, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of this, you know, zero evidence based information getting pushed out there to where it seems like a lot of just fear mongering, and you know, it's probably a good business model as far as like, you know, trying to just say like, look, we have this information, give us some money. You know, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I mean, you know, maybe these guys will get tracked back down to be held responsible or accountable for these sort of threats and everything. But yeah, I mean, as far as whether or not I think ProtonMail is safe, I think you're right. I mean, in the fact that they seem like a really secure email service. But you know, in the past, I've heard stories like this as far as thinking there's some sort of problem. But like, you know, you're saying, I mean, if you go down that security rabbit hole, the next thing you know, you got a Faraday cage and some old laptop, and you're running in the woods and you're trying to do everything. It's such a give and take with ease of use and like actually being able to use the system and still having strong security. It's like at a certain point, I mean, yeah, I mean, I still have a little bit of trust there with ProtonMail. I mean, if it starts to whittle away, then yeah, I'll start, you know, encrypting my messages even before I send them.
I think this is a great example of how much it doesn't make sense to hack privacy companies. Companies just care about the privacy of their users because they really don't have anything valuable. I mean, for example, in Wasabi, someone would come to me that they hacked me. Okay, you really can't do too much, you know. So it would be, it's really interesting that ProtonMail must be very confident. I mean, okay, it's it's a publicity issue, but probably nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see like a likelihood high they were actually compromised if the people claiming they hacked them couldn't even explain the system architecture properly. Like if you'd actually compromise their system, you would know how it was set up and be able to actually describe it correctly when you're trying to extort money publicly. I mean, that just seems like a huge red flag to me. And it's just like somebody just put together a little bit and is just trying to, you know, try it. Like, what the hell? If I can scare them, then they'll give me money. And if not, like, what does he lose?
Yeah, and unfortunately, one of the outcomes, I don't remember the name of the study, but I think I brought it up in one of my blog posts where I looked at 2 different studies asking like what they considered average people about what do they think about encrypted messaging and how secure it is and stuff. And the answers were pretty awful. A lot of them made statements that, you know, don't reflect reality at all. And what often happens after scare tactics like this are used is that people think, well, it's kind of like what happens with cryptocurrency stuff. They're like, oh, I'm not going to use Trezor wallet or something because, oh, there's this like vulnerability that if you have like physical access to the device, you might be able to execute it. But if you don't, then you can't. But it's a big deal. And I'm going to stop using Trezor and I'm just going to put all my coins on Coinbase. So like instead of going towards more secure services, people end up going towards less secure things because they think the secure things are pointless. So the outcome definitely of this should not be for people to revert to something like text messaging, for example. Like that should never, any time that is your inclination, you should probably assume that probably whatever tactic was used to convince you of that is probably trying to get you to go in that direction, and that the threat is maybe not real. And it obviously doesn't help your situation to start using a less secure service, because that kind of, you know, like we don't hear about phone companies being backdoored. Well, we do hear about them in like leaked NSA documents, of course, but no one pays attention to that. So yeah, it should never be your response to, like, I saw a lot of people saying, you know, use Gmail and stuff. And one of the claims that the person made was that, oh, ProtonMail is secretly sending everyone's emails to an American company. And it's like, well, if that scares you, hello, I would like to remind you, Google is an American company. And if you don't know about their connections, if one of your fears is like, you know, government surveillance and stuff, obviously Google is worse in that category.
Most definitely so. Such a give and take there to try and, you know, I mean, that's where I think it is like a lot of just, you know, it's being pushed out there, and, you know, like we're saying, it's probably just all a bunch of fluff to try and get some money. And I mean, yeah, it's always like a fight to try and say like, oh, is it worth it to do all this? It's such a hassle, you know. But I mean, if you want to stay secure, I mean, it's worth it going through the extra trouble. All these things that are just like really easy to use, you can, you know, pretty much guarantee that there's somebody in the middle selling that data, or you know, monitoring it at least.
Alrighty, Janine, should we get into my favorite government in the whole wide world getting caught being completely full of shit for 2 years?
Well, to be fair, we knew that they were full of shit for the past 7 years. But yes, this is a much more embarrassing way of showing that they're full of shit. So if everyone doesn't know, there is a system called PACER, which stands for Public Access to Court Electronic Records. And it's a federal service that basically provides a, you know, archive of, you know, legal documents, stuff like that. I believe, as we've found out, that they obviously use Amazon Web Services, which is great because it means Amazon has all of this stuff. And something weird happened. I'm not sure when the document went public, but there was a document filed. I think, is it an appeal? I'm not sure what the. I think it's a motion to seal. There was a motion to seal document that was filed on August 22nd of this year. Again, I'm not sure when it went public in the database, but someone, I think it was actually a journalist, his first name was Sean. I have it on my Twitter timeline, but basically he was apparently looking through the Pacer database, and he came across this motion to seal that was for a unrelated case to what we will eventually talk about, in the Eastern District of Virginia. And the case was about the government basically giving reasons why they should seal the criminal complaint and things like that, given facts in his case. The weird thing is that there are 2 instances in the document where they mention the name Assange. And at first, well, why would that be in there? Because this case has literally nothing to do with Assange. It's a completely different person. But basically what people suspect is that either through some kind of weird copy pasting error, such as if the person writing up the document wanted to use similar language from a different case, something like that. We're not exactly sure how it happened, but either way, somehow Assange's name ended up in this document, relating to, a sealed indictment, which is exactly what we've suspected for the past 7 years. And the reason being is because in the Stratfor email leak, there was an email from someone who at the time was a deputy chief at the State Department. And he told someone else at Stratfor, he's now he has a position at Stratfor, and he told someone else internally through an email, I tweeted it. Let me get the tweet really quickly. The email said, "Not for publication. We have a sealed indictment on Assange. Please protect." And he apparently sent it via BlackBerry by AT&T. And that was Burton. I can't remember his first name, but he was a State Department deputy chief. And so we've known since 2012 that there was a high likelihood that there was a sealed indictment against Assange. Most likely for, in this case, it would be the collateral murders video and everything related to the Afghanistan war diaries or Iraq war diaries. And so this sealed indictment has probably existed for at least 7 years, if not longer. So all of the people who are claiming that now, because everyone's now talking about the sealed indictment that has been filed against Assange, that is, they're claiming basically that it's because of the Vault 7 leaks, which I think, it's possible that this is not the same sealed indictment. This could have been a new one that was inadvertently leaked through the Pacer records. But I find that, it wouldn't be necessary. They could just add it to the previous sealed indictment, I assume. So this is basically a second confirmation that the US government has a sealed indictment against Assange and WikiLeaks in general, for their journalistic activities over the past decade. So that was just really funny because, we're talking about an organization whose business, whose goal is to help whistleblowers publish relevant documents about what governments and corporations are doing in the world. And so it's kind of funny that the government that they were leaking about decided to put this document in a public Amazon database, and there was a mistake in it, which inadvertently revealed the existence of a sealed indictment. I just find it funny whenever that happens. Governments or companies inadvertently leak things, especially when it's about an organization called WikiLeaks.
Whoopsies. There's also another potential explanation, and that's that somebody intentionally released this through some other document or arranged for that in order to get this out there publicly. Although I don't think that's as likely as a screw up, because the way systems like that generally work, in my experience, is every action is tied to somebody's username. So I think it would be highly unlikely you would be able to publish something through a system like that without it being tied to your identity, and you pretty much getting caught red-handed doing it.
Yeah, it's possible it was intentional, but we don't know that. And the other thing I want to mention is a organization called Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press also announced when this leak was discovered that they have filed a motion in the Eastern District of Virginia to unseal the U.S. government's criminal charges against Julian Assange after the existence of the criminal complaint, i.e. sealed indictment, was revealed in a separate court filing. So yeah, there's a number of journalist organizations that seem to think that this was credible evidence that a sealed indictment existed, and so they're now pursuing legal action in response to that to get the indictment unsealed so that we know what exactly they're trying to charge them with. Because so far, WikiLeaks has not been charged with anything in any country. So this would not only be a big deal if it's revealed that that's what they're trying to do more aggressively now, which it sounds like it based on the news reports. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this has been, I mean, like, it's good to see this. Honestly, like, I think this could help him. I mean, whenever it comes to, like, people saying a lot of times, like, why didn't you just walk right out of there? We're not after him. It's like, come on. We know that they're going to go after him. And, I mean, to see, this indictment that's been sealed for a long time, I mean, I think this will be something that he can use at least whenever maybe the Ecuadorian embassy is giving him trouble, saying like, there's no charges against you. At least he's got a little bit of evidence there now to say like, look, there's definitely someone coming after me.
Yeah, the most annoying thing over the past week or so since this came out was that there are still people saying that the reason Assange is in the Ecuadorian embassy is to avoid the rape investigation in Sweden. First of all, rape was not one of the charges, not even one of the legal charges because the time expired. The actual investigation was closed by the Swedish government after they interviewed him. I believe it was in 2016. So that is closed now. It's no longer effective, even if, we consider the fact that the women involved didn't actually want to charge him with anything. Let's forget that part. Everyone also wants to forget that when it was first published while he was in Sweden that he was wanted for an interview regarding there were no charges, but he wanted for an interview on these allegations. He immediately surrendered himself to the Swedish police or Stockholm police station and was interviewed. The women involved were interviewed. He was cleared. He was let go. He was told he could leave the country. And so he did. And then the case was reopened, I think a month later when he was in another country. So the idea that he is trying to hide from the investigation is completely bogus, because if you're trying to hide from investigation, you don't voluntarily go to the police station and get interviewed and then get cleared and then get released. But everyone wants to forget that part.
Yeah, it's just crazy upsetting to see, like, this guy's been in there for 6 years and people are still kind of running with that narrative. And there's just been so many narratives around him and this whole situation for so long now that, it makes me think that maybe a little of this is just like this back and forth intelligence, battle where it's just like, how are you going to help this guy without, saying that you don't necessarily condone his behavior or anything like that. I mean, this could be something like, where they could, try and help. It's just so hard to read, but I mean, for the most part, I mean, like, or not for the most, just entirely, I wish that, everybody would just get a hold of their wits about them and understanding, like, there's truthful information coming from this source, and whatever you're looking at outside of that, it's skewed and it's a narrative and it's being built to convince you of some information. So, I mean, people just need to wake up to that, and hopefully, he can use this, bit of evidence to try and help him, prove his point that, there's forces that are greater than him coming after him to try and silence him. And that's just really a terrible thing when it comes to rights that you should believe that are important as an American, and checks and balances in the governance system that's, you know, pushing this whole thing forward. So, you know, it's upsetting that this whole thing just keeps getting this narrative spin on it. And I imagine a greater percentage of people do understand that, you know, this is something that's helpful, and, you know, this is the way the press should be doing their job. And if it goes through to where he does get arrested, I think it'd just be a terrible thing. So, I mean, every little bit of, you know, updates we could do on this sort of story, I hope we just keep doing it, and hopefully it'll be positive. But it's hard to say. It's a tough fight.
I think any indictment that exists being unsealed would just be a net positive in the end, because there's no more hiding behind personal attacks in the media, like you know, attacking how he's taking care of his cats, or constantly making allusions to sexual misconduct charges that were completely dropped. Like, it would completely put all the cards on the table and show that in all likelihood that the charges filed are something to do with, air quote, espionage, or something pretty much infringing on his First Amendment rights or activities as a journalistic organization, which I think would, one, make things a lot more clear in terms of the public's perception of things, and also probably get a lot more media companies on board with kind of moving a little bit closer to Assange's and WikiLeaks side on things, if they are to see blatantly that what's going on here is pretty much an attack on being a journalist, like, and trying to paint that as some kind of espionage activity or other excuses to prevent him from publishing things to show corruption.
Yeah, and I just, because I believe you mentioned the sexual misconduct charges, and I have to correct myself sometimes. So just to be clear, there were no charges ever. It was always about interviewing him on the allegations, but there was never actually any charges filed. But yeah, I definitely, the weird one that he's getting is that he's a traitor and all of this. It's like, you realize he's an Australian? Like, I'm sorry, did we all become US citizens just because the US empire decided to reach its fingers all over the globe? Like, does that make us all beholden to the United States and mean that we can't do anything remotely against their interests?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's just bad drones.
Yep. If you're on Earth, you belong to America. That's how things work right now.
I actually think there was a pretty amazing tweet from the WikiLeaks account that put it perfectly. I'm going to look it up right now because it was good and I don't want to misquote it. Let's see, where is it? Keep talking while I look for it. I think it's not that far back.
I'm just thinking about that octopus patch where it's like nothing's outside of our reach. You know, I mean, they're pretty blatant about the way that they feel. It's really crazy. It's like a time where, you know, everything's getting shook up, and they're just testing where their jurisdictions are and how far they can push it.
Silence for you.
All right.
Yeah.
I think.
Find it.
Oh my God, where'd it go? Damn it. Where is it? Oh, wait, no. I think it was a reply, and that's why I'm not seeing it. Okay, I can't hold the mic and look for the tweet. So basically, the tweet was something about how the U.S. with its international standing, it wants to avoid liabilities, but it wants to enforce liability. Basically, they want to not be punished in international court for any actions that they do around the globe, but they want to make everyone else around the globe be beholden to their legal system. And, you know, so it's about a double standard.
That tweet. It was they want jurisdiction across the entire world, but not rights applicable across the entire world.
Yes, yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You know, yeah. So
yeah, so they don't want to grant rights, but they want everyone to have liabilities or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the U.S. is pretty strict about enforcing their rules everywhere, and let's use that to sort of slide into this next story where we're talking about enforcement of rules. On last Friday, the SEC sent out a press release detailing their most recent enforcement actions in this ICO world. It looks like a couple of ICOs started last year were issued cease and desist orders filed under the Securities Act of 1933, which means they should have registered with the SEC as a security, and they didn't qualify for an exemption. The first is AirFox from Carrier IQ Incorporated, who are based out of Sunnyvale, California, but also have offices in London and Malaysia. From their website, it appears AirFox is meant to be an all-in-one wallet for users to pay their bills, top off airtime with prepaid phone providers, fund their public transportation costs, merchant services for customers, loans and airdrops on top of sending and receiving funds. So the SEC's description of the product is, quote, token-denominated ecosystem starting with a mobile application that would allow users in emerging markets to earn tokens and exchange them for data by interacting with advertisements. Okay, so yeah, in that craze last year, AirFox was able to raise 15 million in their token sale by you know, saying that this is what they're going to provide, and it's a lot there. So let's go. The second one is Paragon, which is trying to bring blockchain-based solutions to the cannabis industry and lobby for legalization. Also headquartered in California. This one's in Los Angeles. They were able to raise 12 million in their token sale. I think it should be noted that Civic is partnered with this company. Anyway, it appears they are pretty happy about this enforcement with a big announcement on the Paragon website titled Paragon Reaches Settlement with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, where they touted pretty heavy about being involved with this process for over a year and being at the forefront of the industry and trying to offer securities in this industry that are regulated. So Stephen Avakian, co-director of the SEC's enforcement division, said, quote, we have made it clear that companies that issue securities through ICOs are required to comply with existing statutes and rules governing the registration of securities. This cease tells those who are considering taking similar actions that we continue to be on the lookout for violations of the federal securities law with respects to digital assets. Stephen Piken, another co-director from the SEC's enforcement division, said, quote, by providing investors who purchase securities in these ICOs with the opportunity to be reimbursed, I'm sorry, I lost my spot, to be reimbursed and having the issuers register their tokens with the SEC. These orders provide a model for companies that have issued tokens in ICOs and seek to comply with the federal securities law. Both ICOs had to pay a $250,000 fine and include undertakings to compensate investors who might have been harmed. And, you know, when this news broke, the Bitcoin price already started to drop, you know, from reasons outside of this action. But I saw it pretty heavily speculated on this. Yes. And then, yeah, they were saying that this enforcement signaled the end of the crypto craze, similar to the story about what we just covered about the Bakkt story, saying it was the end of the investors coming into the space. They're saying this was the end of the ICO craze, but I doubt that. We'll probably start to see a lot more registered ICOs here in the U.S. who want to raise funds from U.S. investors. And, you know, like we're saying, as far as laws being pushed outward, this is one where I don't know if they're going to be able to enforce this to ICOs that aren't, you know, that aren't really selling to U.S. customers. I don't think we're going to see much enforcement there. But, you know, I don't know, as far as projecting U.S. power and trying to bring people to justice. I mean, they might try to do that stuff. I mean, we saw that from the New York Attorney General there trying to push Kraken around. But did you guys catch any of this news and its fallout? Have any comments on this SEC statement?
Yeah. Sorry for the background noise. If there's any, I snuck outside for a cigarette. But yeah, I think like
don't say that.
I think this is really going to wind up going very, very badly for a lot of ICOs because if everybody remembers, I think maybe a month or so ago, maybe a little more, we covered the BitMEX research report looking at kind of putting together all the available data and looking at where individual ICOs likely cashed out and how many were sitting on already realized profits from the top versus how many were sitting on losses or crypto assets still as the entire market went down. And there are definitely a few ICOs in the, okay, dude, camera off right now. but there were a lot of ICOs that had that definitely would qualify under a lot of metrics as ICOs that were sitting on massive losses. So those few ICOs, if any enforcement action is taken against them, it's going to be really tough, I think, for them to really muster together any money to refund investors. And then as far as like what you just said about like not holding anything that's a security liable if there's no U.S. investors, well, I think the CFTC and the SEC's action against one broker in Europe really cast that in a whole new light. Because if I was, you know, in a position in an agency like the SEC, and I knew it was going to take a while to really get through the investigative work and really put all of the paperwork together and the ducks in a row to do something, but I really wanted to have a wide sweeping enforcement action against a lot of things in the space, I would just go buy a few tokens for every single ICO that I saw. Like have a U.S. citizen or a law enforcement agent do it. And then when everything gets put together, like everything's organized for enforcement action, every single ICO is liable if it's deemed a security because you ensured that a law enforcement officer made a purchase as a U.S. citizen during that ICO. And it's really like, I would be shocked if they did not do something like that in the prep work for this action over the last year or two. Like, I would really be shocked.
Yeah. So in relation to, obviously, I've been investigating the civil project a little. You can look through previous episodes or my super, super, super long Twitter thread about it. It's really long. It's probably my longest thread ever. And I think I commented a few days ago that I think because they made this promise that the next sale, because the first one failed, the next sale would be a lot easier. They were going to, I don't know, somehow maneuver their way to having less strict KYC requirements in order to buy the tokens. I don't think that's going to be possible. So I found that promise that was made a month ago. At that point, I already thought it was not going to work. And now I definitely don't think it's going to work because there is no way that KYC restrictions are going to get more lax after this comment from the SEC and stricter enforcement against some of the projects. So yeah, I don't see, I would be really surprised if Civil relaunched their token sale at all. I would be surprised even more if it was an easier sale this time around. And I coincidentally, while we were on the show, someone I love, RJA, sent me an article that was recently published, I think, in the Next Web about the Kodak ICO, which is also something I investigated. And apparently one of the one of the consequences of these ICO projects failing, even the more high profile ones like Kodak and the one that is has been graced by the almighty benevolent billionaire Joseph Lubin. These projects have a lot of internal problems. For example, it was revealed recently that a lot of employees have either left, been fired, or let go without much notice from Token Foundry, which was how Civil was distributing or trying to distribute its tokens. So there definitely is, I mean, part of it is just the bear market, but another part of it is the fact that these ICOs are not working. And if you're the distribution mechanism for that, you're probably even in a worse position. So they're having layoffs. And then someone sent me one for Kodak. And apparently, according to the Next Web, they have over $100,000 in unpaid developer fees. So they're not even paying their own developers and employees enough money, which does not surprise me because if you didn't hear about that, their token sale also not working out with that whole democratizing photography with your investor licensed investor only sale. So I found that pretty funny. That just came up in my feed. Someone sent me that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you know, Civil and Kodak are probably maybe taking some steps to try and you know, right themselves as far as getting some of their investors back some of the money that they had lost in this. And so let me just run into this other story because this feeds right back into what all we're talking about. So another troubling story for CEO Eric Voorhees. Back in September, we heard that Wall Street Journal investigation concluded that Shapeshift was helping launder nearly $90 million and help users maintain anonymity for over a 2-year period, which Eric responded with a blog post saying the report was factually inaccurate and deceptive, and that the authors do not have a sufficient understanding of blockchain and our platform in particular. Well, we haven't heard any updates regarding that investigation, but according to the Wall Street Journal, again, Eric's other company, Salt Lending, is being investigated by the SEC. The article was published on Thursday and cites, quote, people familiar with the probe, which, to be honest, is one word away from all the usual sources, probe, or people familiar with the matter. These people say Salt was subpoenaed by the SEC back in February of this year. They are looking for information regarding Salt's $50 million ICO held back in late of last year, late 2017. Of course, they are wondering whether or not Salt's ICO was a security offering, but they also want to know how their tokens were distributed to insiders and how the sale proceeds are being spent. The article also goes on to speculate that this was in violation of Eric's 2014 ban from the SEC from offering any Bitcoin-related securities for a 5-year period. For those who are wondering what this is about, it was from a conclusion of the SEC's investigation into Satoshi Dice and Paisy Bird's pretty funny little projects back in the day. So all of this comes from a lawsuit filed against the CFO. Yeah, all of this information comes from a lawsuit filed against the CFO of Salt from a former executive named Jennifer Nelson. Eric responded with a blog post Friday stating, quote, the Wall Street Journal has once again published an inaccurate and misleading article against me and against the crypto industry. First, I am not party to the private lawsuit brought against Salt by a former CFO of the company, filed a few days ago, and the apparent basis of this story rushed into print. Second, I have abided by the terms of my SEC settlement. Third, the Wall Street Journal has not dealt with me or my company Shapeshift in good faith, and with this recent story is simply an unfortunate continuation of that trend. And then he goes on, he says, just going to finish this out. He says, while we expect defenders of the status quo in the financial sector to enjoy reading attacks against the industry that aim to disrupt them, for those who care about the kind of truth and transparency that the blockchain requires of our industry, you might need to find other news outlets. I think he's correct in saying this. It's just a lot of speculation from a platform we shouldn't trust. And I also think Salt Lending was a good idea that didn't really need a token sale. And it's something that I've talked back and forth with some people here locally, because Salt and Eric is a company here locally in Colorado. And it's something where we've talked about it. It's one of these things that might be looked at as a security. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they if Salt is in discussion with the SEC about paying a possible fine, but that doesn't warrant a big piece like the Wall Street Journal put out. And this is 2 in a row from them when it comes to hits against the industry and Eric in particular. I wouldn't doubt if they are just a megaphone for the traditional sector who aren't happy about our industry and want to pile on with the other FUD from this week. Maybe some of them are buying the dip, or just, or they just need something to, you know, get their ears hearing the right things that they want to hear about the markets. And even if they are working with the SEC to come to a resolution, I wouldn't think of that as a bad thing. But, you know, like we're saying, as far as what the SEC could be digging into, I mean, you know, this is all just speculation. But as far as like a $50 million ICO raised last year, and, you know, they're looking as far as how those tokens were denominated to insiders and how are those proceeds being spent. I mean, when we're talking about platforms like Civil and Kodak, we know that there wasn't much anything back behind of any of that. So they're either scrambling to figure something out or scrambling to make sure that they're not going to get penalized too hard about all this. So did you guys have any comment on this story with the investigation into Salt Lending and Eric from the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it kind of is like, I understand why Eric keeps like, looking at things in terms of like the media just writing hit pieces against him. And I would definitely say I would more agree with that statement when it was made back in August and September regarding shapeshift and money laundering. But I mean, in the case of Salt, like I think like these price structures for the ICO tokens were just ridiculously scumbaggy in terms of insider discounts that would allow people with more personal connections to Salt and the people involved to just be able to dump them at massive gains based on preferential pricing early on. And like you said, like there was no reason really to have a token or an ICO with this kind of product, like a crypto collateralized fiat loans. Like that's a business that makes sense on its own. Like you don't need to throw an ICO token. You don't need an air quote utility token for that. It's pretty straightforward. You match both sides of it and you facilitate the loan. And I really think like, it sucks to see like something that makes sense be turned into what amounts to a scam because you throw a token and an ICO on it. Because I think things like this are very useful until we really grow to like the size and market capitalization that Bitcoin is stable enough to actually use as currency itself. Like this is a way that allows people to take their crypto holdings and despite the volatility actually gain some economic use. Like you can just use that as collateral for a loan. And over long time horizons, if things keep trending upwards, like you can minimize to a huge degree the amount of crypto that you're parting with just by taking out these loans in fiat and kind of sitting on them for a while until like the amount that you have to pay back in terms of the crypto you put up are much smaller than when you initially took the loan. And it's really like I think the further we see things develop in this ecosystem, that's probably something that more legacy oriented institutions are probably going to start looking at in terms of products that they can build for end consumers. And so it really just sucks to see pretty much a fucking scumbag idiot in the ecosystem take a really good idea like that and just fuck it up. And not just for the sake of it being fucked up, but now it's like yet again, here we have another, rationalization for more bad hit pieces in the mainstream media that people are going to be exposed to because he had to throw an ICO and a cash grab on top of something that would have made sense without it.
Yeah, that's where a lot of discussion comes up, at these meetups when we're talking and, we bring up companies and a lot of this SALT token structure just seems so irrelevant. You don't really need this there. And it does seem like a good idea as far as just, holding one's crypto and giving them a fiat loan. But yeah, it's one of those things where, it's the Wall Street Journal. It's not really cited that well as far as the source, as far as people familiar with the probe. But I mean, it is like from a lawsuit, with one of their executives about this. And, I just like we're saying, as far as the previous story with the enforcement on those ICOs, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some SEC talks about that ICO last year and this token supply and what exactly it's being used for. It wouldn't be too shocking, to be honest. Like we're saying, I mean, as much as, we like to talk about, these traditional markets coming after us with these, hit pieces. I mean, it's just like the facts there kind of line up to, there's probably some discussion going on behind the scenes as far as, paying a fine and making sure that the structure is actually something that's useful. I mean, it might be like this token might be, dissolved. I don't know. I mean, it's, as far as there might have some use case for it in this lending structure that I'm not seeing. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at the fact that for right now, it looks like all this enforcement action is coming within the United States, but like we're saying, I mean, they did do that one broker deal and, we'll have to see going forward where all this enforcement's going to go. But it looks like it's moving forward. And that's something where, you know, like we were saying in the first story, it's a good reason why Bakkt might have delayed their contracts and making sure that they're doing all this right.
Yeah. And I think one of the topics of discussion on Twitter over the last week or so after these SEC comments was that there's too many people who are like gleeful about the fact that, you know, people are being punished when, you know, a lot of this crowd is obviously anarchist, libertarian leaning. But actually my reason for, you know, not wanting to really defend these people or even having like some kind of what's the word? Some kind of mischievous joy in the fact that they're being taken down is not really so much to do with the legality, because I mean, obviously there are plenty of things that are illegal in various countries which I don't believe that people should be punished for. I think the legal system is really messed up at a fundamental level. My thing is more to do with the fact that all of these projects are using all of these buzzwords like decentralized, censorship resistant, secure, all of these things that Bitcoin actually is, whereas these tokens are not. I mean, most of them are just centralized shitcoins. So the joy that I get out of this, or at least the satisfaction that I get out of the SEC going after them, is that if the SEC can take you down, like, you're not decentralized, you're not censorship resistant, you're not secure. And so if the SEC is kind of like the step one level of testing whether you are actually implementing those principles or concepts or architectures, that's fine with me. Like, if you can't even be secure against the SEC, then I'm sorry. Like, you deserve to be shown for what you really are, which is basically just some get rich quick scheme.
All right, no para. What do you got there?
No, I don't really have much. I just put the best software in the world to my screen share. I mean the second best software, because the best is Wasabi. Yeah. Because the internet is not good now. I mean, two of us here, so I cannot show my face, so I had to show something interesting. So here you go.
I think I saw someone in the troll box saying that every time Shinobi tells Nopara to come on camera, he's killing babies. Which is a little confusing now, because does babies mean like human babies, or does it mean babe as in the weird soap opera fork of Bitcoin Cash that happened last week?
All
Both.
kinds
Is that
of
the baby
babies.
we're talking about? Both. Okay. That's
yeah,
true.
those babies. Oh man, that's a funny story. We'll get to.
All right. Since you brought it up, though, let's get through this next one, and then we can get into the large chunk of BCash drama. But so, in light with the Bakkt delay and some updates on that, we've also seen a few days ago that Amun Crypto has been given the green light to launch a crypto ETF under the tag money sign HODL on the 6 Swiss exchange, which I want to remind everybody is one of the federation members of Liquid that's going to be launching next week. And so initially this is, it's get ready to complain. It's going to be a weighted basket of a few different cryptos with around half of the assets in Bitcoin and the rest divvied up between Bitcoin Cash. Which one, though? I have no idea. It'll be pretty funny to see that unfold. Ripple, Ethereum, and Litecoin, with, I think it's saying the allocation of Ripple being 30%, which is let's just say I see a large potential for holders of any shares of these baskets to get a lot of pain because of that allocation. But, we'll see this. This is really only the first step as far as Amun trying to launch products on this. And they are planning to move on in the future and start offering individual shares or ETF products that are just single crypto products. But for now, the reason they've moved with this basket, and I can, as much as I think it's stupid and is going to wind up just losing people profits in the long term, is, you know, coming completely fresh into this space, you just see a million things to pick between and invest in with different reasons why you should. And it really takes a while to move through the whole learning curve coming into this space to really see why things other than Bitcoin are stupid and pointless and don't really make any sense when you get to the bottom of it. So this, it's like, for all the new people coming in, they don't have to think about that. Like, it's just the basket weights itself with predominantly Bitcoin and then the top capitalized cryptos aside from that. And, you know, really at the end of the day, things like this, like, it's, you know, this will just be a learning experience for new people coming in. When things really get to that point where other things stop continuing the momentum that keeps them following Bitcoin and really get smashed into the ground, well, it's going to be index products like this that really get fucked over, because those averages from other cryptos are going to drag down the entire share value, and you'll realize less gains than you would have just being exclusively exposed to Bitcoin. And really, like, the last thing here is, you know, with their integration with Liquid, I think like the Six here is kind of positioning themselves to be in a really good place in terms of arbitrage. Like, I'm not really sure like whether these are physically deliverable at any point, but even if they're not, like, Liquid still integrates them through things like Tether or USD, or, well, I guess not USDC because that's on Ethereum, but, you know, any kind of stable coin that can be pegged into Liquid or natively issued on Liquid allows that arbitrage loop to be closed a lot tighter. And so it's still, even if not physically deliverable, links them into that wider, you know, marketplace. And I think, like, really, as we see things like this come online and Bakkt come online, I think we will see a lot of the big institutions looking at Liquid or things like Liquid as, you know, a huge way to address a lot of the concerns of the SEC. You know, historically, every time we've seen an ETF proposal denied, one of the chief things brought up time and time again is market integrity, market manipulation. And the more you intermingle all the independent pools of liquidity with frictionless arbitrage, the harder you make it for like a market or two to be widely manipulated in a way that's going to affect the entire global market, because that will be closed very quickly by arbitrage. And so the more things plug into something like Liquid, I think the less able, you know, something like the SEC will be able to keep dragging that excuse out over and over again. Like, it's like, no, it's not that kind of an issue anymore.
Yeah, I hope with this story we can kind of lay off the ETF stories. But, you know, like, yeah, I've seen a lot of speculation on Twitter as far as just saying, like, how's the SEC going to deny this these ETFs, and like this is good for Van Eck. And, you know, there's still all the speculation about ETFs, but the basket offering thing, like, that is something where I was like, oh man, like all that XRP in that, it just doesn't look good. But, you know, it could definitely just kind of bloat those markets bigger than they really need to be. And like you're saying, I mean, when they fall down, that's going to be a big slash on, you know, what their underlying value of that product. So it's something where I think, you know, in the future, we're going to start seeing all these different ETPs, ETFs, to where it is like some of them are like Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. Some are Bitcoin Litecoin. Some are, you know, more XRP based. Is Jesus, like that's something that you just can't avoid, man. It's crazy how many XRP bots are out there asking for anything to do with the, like, even the Bakkt like tweets
Mr.
out.
Mr. Bakkt, can you list XRPP next, please? Can you list XRPP?
Yeah, I could see, you know, yeah, Starbucks and Microsoft and all them getting involved. No way. I mean, like, this is where it's like there's going to be different products. There's going to be more legitimate products. Like, this isn't exactly a product I'm happy with, but I mean, like, it is good to see one of them get out the door, right? And you know, maybe it will help these others move through. So we'll see.
Speaking
Alrighty.
of, really quickly, speaking of Switzerland and Shinobi, come on.
All right.
Speaking of Switzerland and stablecoins, something that we did not make a story yet is that I don't know if you guys heard, but there was a Swiss franc stablecoin that was released at the beginning of this month. And when I heard about it, I thought it was hilarious because if you think about it, the Swiss franc is kind of a stable coin in itself because its exchange rate is really closely pegged to the US dollar, whether that's intentional or not. I mean, usually people think that's intentional. But I just found it really funny that they recently, I think the company was called Swiss Crypto. Let me check the article really quick. Swiss, it's called XCHF, that's the token, and it was released by Swiss Crypto Tokens.
XCHFPP?
No, I just found it funny because when I saw that, the first thought that went through my head was, oh, a stable coin for a stable coin. Because
So many stable coins.
yeah.
Have you ever wanted to increase the risk of rehypothecation collapsing on itself exponentially? Just make stable coins all the way down.
Yeah, everything will blow.
All right, though. All right. Time for the main event. And holy Jesus, is this hysterical. So
all right, we'll let you run through it.
Depending on which exchange you're talking about after Thursday's fun event, BCH is dead. And like this is just really hysterical. And this was one of the things that I was like, it was one of the first things I thought about when both sides of these, both factions really started digging in and went, no, we're going to fork, is both of the chains, ABC and Satoshi's Vision, hard forked. Like neither of them can make any claim to be the incumbent chain that continued without a break from the pre-existing chain. So like really the BCash chain, well the one that we're calling BCash now because everybody knows that Classic is the real original BCash.
Right.
Is actually dead. Like there is no rational or logical argument for either of these chains to claim to be BCash at this point. Like they both hard forked away from the original chain. Like in the way that after the 2x fell apart and we got SegWit and BCash originally forked off Bitcoin, like that nonsense argument that they kept trying to make that SegWit coin and BCash forked away from the original Bitcoin, like it was horseshit when trying to be painted in that context. But in this one, it is an accurate description. The original chain is dead, and two chains have forked away from that, both. And so we've seen like Binance has decided to, I believe their tickers are BCaBC and BCHSV. And their CEO has explicitly stated on Twitter that these are not changed. These are the tickers that they are sticking with. And no matter what, they're not going to alter them in the future. Poloniex has also followed and done the same thing. The BCH market has been shut down, and there's now BCaBC and BCHSV trading against USDC and against BTC. And Bitfinex, I don't think have stated that they're permanently committing to these tickers, but at least currently they're listing the ABC chain as BAB and the N-chain fork as BSV. And though they haven't permanently committed to it, I think it's highly unlikely that they're going to deviate from that and award the BCH ticker to either one of them. It just it's doesn't make sense to really pick a side at this point. Like, it seems like, you know, two of the key markets really in altcoin liquidity have definitively committed to new independent tickers for each coin. And I think that even the exchanges like Coinbase, I believe, has not made any action whatsoever so far. They're still not crediting users with both coins, although they have historically been very slow in this. And Kraken actually has awarded the BCH ticker to ABC, and I believe they're using BSV. Let me check real quick. Yeah, they're using BSV for the Satoshi's Vision client from Enchain. And the interesting thing with Kraken, and really as funny as I think this is, I think this was a bad way to handle this, only because of the fact that they're leaving the BCH ticker with the ABC fork, but they have an explicit warning to trade Bitcoin SV, saying that it does not meet Kraken's usual listing requirements, spelling out there's no block explorers, there's no wallets supporting any kind of replay protection, that miners are operating at a loss, that its representatives are threatening and openly hostile to other chains, that its survival might be mutually exclusive with the ABC chain, that the market supply is temporarily restricted, implying it's holding the price up because there's no wallet support, that large holders have indicated they would be dumping all of it as soon as they can, and that Kraken has had very little time for any kind of code review of the client. And so, I think what they should have done is they should have broken things up like Binance, Poloniex, and Bitfinex have, and give completely new tickers to both chains, and still issued this warning. But I think just it's, I don't know, I think it's picking sides instead of sticking to an objective, consistent line of reasoning in terms of how to handle an event like this, which I think is pretty straightforward. And as a business like an exchange, I personally think it's their responsibility to not be picking sides and pushing an agenda in a situation like this. It's very common sense here. If in the instance of the entire 2x fiasco, if there is an incumbent chain, that is the original ticker. There is no reasonable or logical argument against that. In the case of this recent incident with BCash, both of them hard forked from the original chain, so neither of them has any kind of logical claim to that ticker or that price history. And I think that, again, as funny as I think this is, Kraken kind of handled this a little bit of the wrong way, in my opinion, although I still think it's hysterical.
So to quickly, someone in the troll box is actually saying that Coinbase has given the BCH ticker to BitcoinABC and sending a link. So not sure where they saw that.
I think I saw that too yesterday. They're trying to claim something, they're trying to this is like exchanges aligning sides, but yeah, let's keep going. There's there's some more getting through this, all these updates that have happened in the past week, but let's keep going.
Yeah, so the entire hash battle has just been hysterically awkward at this point. So Calvin Iyer and CoinGeek have been continuing to make more and more, how would you say this? More and more tame claims as the days have gone by. Initially saying that they're going to carry this on for weeks or months if they have to, and attempt to bankrupt Bitmain because of I don't know how many of you actually followed the hash rate during the fork, but immediately following the fork, you had a flat line of the initial BCash hash rate, and almost immediately the ABC chain surpassed that by twice, and the Satoshi's Vision client hit equal with it. So effectively after the fork, you had 300 percent of the original BCash hash rate at the time of the fork mining both chains. And I think like, okay, I need to figure out how I'm going to weave through these next few topics here. Okay, so you had the initial plan here on Calvin's part was to effectively take this hash rate they had in reserve and decimate the ABC chain. But obviously Roger and Jihan had their own hash rate in reserve that was almost double what Calvin had at his disposal to attempt to attack the chain. So it almost immediately negated his plan to just reorg the ABC chain. And, over the past few days, he's kind of gone from like very bold claims we're going to bankrupt Bitmain to like, well, this is not going to be decided in a day or two, until finally recently he's made pleas for the chains to stop attacking each other if they both agree to take their own respective ticker symbols. So like ABC and BSV to take their own tickers to neither claim right to the BCH history or price data. And then everybody can just leave each other alone and go their own way. So it pretty much took, just a few days for all of that talk to really bluster out. And, really quick, before you get to the Coinbase comment, Janine, like, I just think like the funniest part about this is the entire checkpoint procedure that that ABC went through. And, for people who haven't been keeping up with it, like the initial checkpoint that they made after the hard fork is not really too out of the ordinary. Like that was something that Bitcoin did through a long part of its history. And really the rationale was half kind of to stop ridiculously long reorganizations, but also to speed up the bootstrapping process. Because effectively, once a checkpoint was put into a new client, that client can just go through the entire chain without running all of the signature verification and everything up into that block, because that's been committed to in the client. And part of the reason that Bitcoin core developers stopped including these checkpoints in the core software was because, one, like there's been huge improvements in validation speed and time, so it's not really as necessary for the bootstrapping process anymore. And two, just it is a consensus or failure risk, because if you have like multiple clients out there with different checkpoints, like to go past and reorg just prior to the most recent checkpoint, you can cause a divergence where the newest client will refuse to follow that, but all prior ones will. And it really is like not a wise thing to have, just because of that huge risk of consensus split. And so that's why we stopped doing it. And the BitcoinABC team, well, that's 5 days ago, I think, when this was originally proposed to have a regular rolling, not really checkpoints, but an equivalent of it to prevent reorganizations. Dad Alnick said this is a horribly dangerous idea. And here we are 5 days later. They have released a new version of ABC with a patched consensus change. This is a consensus change in a soft fork that would have clients refuse to reorganize to a new chain if it goes back more than 10 blocks. And so like this, I think, is a huge part of why Calvin and not so much Craig's attitude, but overall the end chain attitude has shifted to this kind of plea for not attacking each other, because they can't just go through and reorganize huge lengths of the chain anymore. But what they can do is split the network, because like you still have XT clients, you have the Bitcoin Unlimited clients, you have different versions of ABC, and pretty much like this is like there is no authority here. Like if your client has recognized a block, like even something just as simple as your node being one block behind another node, if you go back on an 11 block reorg, both of those nodes will react differently, even though like it's the same software version, it's the same code. Simply that one difference in the block that you are aware of is the most recent block would split you off onto two separate chains. So like now they've opened themselves up to a whole new attack vector where you can just cause arbitrary chain splits. This makes it 1,000,000 times easier to Sybil attack a node and put them on a fake chain that you entirely control. Like this is one of the stupidest things in the world. And the funniest part is that this is a user configurable option. Like there is a flag when you start your ABC node to turn this off, to deactivate a new consensus rule. And like this is just a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, and I believe there's a joke going around on Twitter that they should rename BitcoinABC to Amory's oh, now I forgot the word. What did I do? Amory's spreadsheet. Yes, that's what they should rename it to. To quickly give the Coinbase message, they updated a blog post that I believe they posted originally on November 13th, which was before the BCash hard fork. They updated it yesterday, and they said, since the Bitcoin Cash fork on November 15th, Coinbase has been closely monitoring the BCH network. We have observed consensus in the community that the BCH ABC chain will retain the designation of Bitcoin Cash. Coinbase will also adopt this designation for BCH. Coinbase has made this decision based on a number of factors, including the fact that ABC has a higher hash rate, which hasn't been that consistent, but I guess, yeah, and a longer proof of work chain. Coinbase is now prepared to resume limited trading in BCH, and then they talk about when they're going to do that. And we will continue to evaluate the safety of the BCH SV chain. Our current intention is to support withdrawal services for the BCH SV chain so that our customers may withdraw funds at a future date. We anticipate this development work will take at least a few weeks, but may take longer. We will communicate directly with customers that hold BCH and notify them when we complete this work and they can withdraw funds from the BCH SV chain. So yeah, Coinbase is going to be potentially holding up the price, or alternatively, as I could say, they're holding a bunch of people hostage and not allowing them to remove their coins and make a choice about which side they want to follow, which someone has suggested may lead to another class action lawsuit.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't have anything to do with their BCash holdings, huh? I mean, like, yeah, this is such a joke. I mean, just watching this whole thing play out and continue to play out, like Coinbase is saying there. I mean, like, it's just too early to make a call. I think, you know, like you're saying, like Binance and Polo sort of just taking this neutral stance, but also just like, yeah, I mean, you know, these chains forked from the original BCH. Like, I don't see why that BCH ticker should be used again. I mean, like, it is BCH ABC and BCH SV. I mean, that's what's out there now. And yeah, I mean, it's just like crazy what's been going on. But I mean, like, I've seen Calvin Iyer like post, you know, like those that tweet of him like wakeboarding around. I've been watching Roger post these videos from Bitcoin.com looking all exhausted and depressed. It's been kind of fun to watch all these developments pop out. But I'm like, why do they still have RBTC subreddit? Like, they need to get rid of that. Like, I mean, they've already forked from that a year ago. So they better start making some new subreddits to take control of.
Dude, it's like everything is imploding. Like the magical thinking of Bcash logic is crumbling to the ground. Like, it's like one instance here is like, I know that a lot of people thought for a little while that there was like an 18 block reorg on the SV chain, but in reality, it only turned out to be 2 blocks, I think, that were, it was pretty much just a natural reorganization because of bad network connectivity for a 16 megabyte block and a 13 megabyte block. But I think the biggest block on the SV chain so far was 64 megabytes. And from some people I've been talking to who were monitoring like the whole situation since the fork pretty closely in technical terms, It took 40 something minutes for that block to fully propagate around the entire network. 40 minutes, 4 times what the block time interval is supposed to be. And so like people are imploding. Like I'm seeing people like in our BTC scream about how no, we can't make the blocks any bigger because like it's breaking things. And you like I'm starting to see people over there like make the exact same arguments that we were making to them a year ago. And it's just like it's recursive insanity. It's hilarious.
Here's another thing. I actually haven't heard Fiat Punta in the troll box is saying, I guess zero conf is out the window, which is like, which is absolutely true because they've been going on for the past year about how Bitcoin should be secure with zero confirmations, and now they're like, we must have at least 10. Like,
They're finally finding out adversarial game theory.
yeah, so I guess Bitcoin, the real Bitcoin, is now more I mean, if you were going to do zero confirmation transactions on any network, I would do it on Bitcoin. But
jeez, man. Yeah, it's just been crazy. I like you're saying, I've been reading through that RBTC subreddit too, and it just sounds like you're saying, I think that you just boiled it down perfect. It's recursive insanity. It is kind of like, wait a minute, do you guys not remember arguing the opposite side of this point like a year ago? Nope. It's a different story today.
Yeah, like I like there's like 2 comments or like threads in a post that really stick out in my head. And one was somebody saying that there's nothing wrong with the rolling reorganization protection in ABC because Satoshi used checkpoints. And it's just like he completely fails to understand that a real checkpoint is like you take the specific block and you hard code it into the client. And it's not like this relative like rolling protection where it's like once my node sees that this is like more than 10 blocks deep, it will never reorg it, even if like your node sees something different. And it's just consensus failure all around. And he went on for like 2 pages worth of like arguing, just like blindly defending this as like it's Satoshi's vision. And then this other guy was trying to argue that the ABC chain is the real Bitcoin, but still trying to say that the most proof of work is what defines Bitcoin. And like the rationalization was like he was trying to say that because the miners last year signaled for SegWit 2x but didn't activate it, that the Nakamoto consensus decided they wanted SegWit 2x, and everybody who decided at the last minute, including all of the miners, to not go through with it, broke Nakamoto consensus. And so because they went around the Nakamoto consensus, they weren't like BTC isn't the real Bitcoin anymore, even though it has the most proof of work, because they broke Nakamoto consensus. He's just like spinning in circles trying to rationalize this.
Yeah, it's absolutely hysterical. Even like when we started this story just a few minutes ago, Calvin Iyer just tweeted this out. He just made a threat on Twitter saying, quote, "I will release the private docs I received next week at the conference once they become public. Amory, Roger, Jahan, Jess Powell, Kraken, and others named. Their life is going to get more exciting. Market manipulation and more."
You didn't pick my chain. I'm gonna sue you.
Right? This is just gonna get so funny, man. It's gonna keep going. Like we'll see how long it takes. Maybe a year from now we'll have 50 BCH ABCs and all the way to Z.
It's this simple. Just stop using the BCH ticker and give ABC a new one. And then what argument does he have?
I don't know, man, but we got a lot more popcorn to eat.
Oh my God, this space has just gotten so stupid. Oh boy.
Okay, we got our lulls in.
Alrighty. So I guess we got 2 more serious things left, and then just a quick mention before we're done. So I guess an update of what's going on in India. In response to the Supreme Court's demanding an answer from the Indian government within 2 weeks as to its position on cryptocurrencies, they have announced that they are going to release the draft report of a bill establishing regulations for virtual currencies and use of distributed ledger technology in the financial system of India. And like, this is really, it's just more kind of stretching to give themselves extra time without really committing themselves to an answer. Like, I know, as we've kind of covered this, the more it's developed, like the Supreme Court, to my knowledge, I haven't really been getting the same kind of information that somebody living in India would, but I don't think they have actually issued a ruling yet, which is why they demanded a comment or clarification from the government before issuing a ruling. There were lots of rumors flying around and people claiming to be party or present to a lot of the meetings for this group that's been meeting to establish a draft bill for this, that are saying things are leaning towards India completely outlawing any kind of private cryptocurrency and even just possession of it, while leaving loopholes to allow them to establish national cryptocurrencies. And it seems like they're just to keep extending this time horizon and using red tape to really not commit themselves to an answer. And though I still think like things are looking more likely that they would lean towards completely outlawing things, except for something government sanctioned, like, it's still like, the longer they draw out committing to anything, the more it seems to me like they're kind of looking for reactions before actually making a legislative commitment one way or the other. Because why else would you be delaying this so long? Like, you just, like, here's our position, like, we're going to outlaw this, except if we do it, and then let's move on now. But it's just like, there's really, again, as it seems every time something develops in this situation, it's just another wait we're going to have to sit through before we see what really happens.
Yeah, I mean, like, hopefully we actually get a draft from this. I mean, they're saying they're going to put it out next month, and it'll just be great to get some actual clarity over there. I mean, I know that the last we talked about this story, there was some back and forth from the RBI to the Supreme Court of India talking about just stay out of our business. So, I mean, just to get some clarity there to where, some guys can actually continue doing business there, it would be great. Or, at least just make a clear position and a stance. If you're going to say no, just go ahead and say no. And, we can see what the political blowback is. It's at least a position, right? Because right now it's just been so up in the air. So fingers crossed, next month we might know what's going on in India. But like you're saying, we're going to have to just hope that it happens.
Mm-hmm. And then this next up, I am getting really sick of this.
You knew it was coming.
Yeah. So, like, pretty much Bloomberg has written an article claiming the U.S. Justice Department, in conjunction with the CFTC, I believe, who has previously subpoenaed Bitfinex and Tether, are investigating Bitcoin market manipulation through using Tether, and trying to investigate whether this had something to do with the huge price run up of last year. Because I mean, let's step back for a minute. Let's ignore the fact that the initial study and report claiming this is delusional in thinking that the small marginal effect that this has per, like, on a basis point level of the Bitcoin price and the type of volume it would create would just be printed out of thin air without fiat deposits, while they were already under CFTC subpoena. So let's step back and be very clear about this. When these accusations really got into full swing and the market went crazy from in the thousands all the way up to 20,000, they were already under CFTC subpoena. So you have to think that they are literally mentally deranged when the US government is already poking their nose in their business to literally just be printing hundreds of millions of dollars out of thin air to manipulate a market while being investigated for manipulating that market. Like, you literally have to think that these people should be in a mental hospital for legitimate insanity to think that is the case. And two, as I Am Nomad points out in pretty much a big breakdown and reaction to the whole article, there's really no new information here. There's no new reports. There's no new status updates on any of this. This is literally just Bloomberg taking a bunch of things that were already reported on months ago at the beginning of the year and just writing a new article about old information. Why? Why are they doing that? Why, right as the price went down, are they rehashing all of this old information with no new updates? Oh, that's right, Janine. Don't they get paid bonuses if they write articles that move the market significantly? Isn't that how Bloomberg's compensation works?
Yeah, I believe they do. And, this is the same news outlet that, what was it, a month or two ago, they did this whole scare story about how a bunch of tech companies' products were affected by a chip that was compromised by, Chinese hackers or something like that. And it turned out, there's like no evidence of that. And a bunch of companies said, no, we're not affected by this. And they have not retracted the story and not explained why they won't retract the story. And it's a big mystery.
Whoopsies. I think there's some dots to be drawn between financial incentives and actions somewhere in there. But what do I know? What do I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's no connection there, right? But yeah, I mean, really, it was kind of yeah. First off, understood it was coming. Like, right when the price started moving, I was like kind of just looking for some story on Tether. I mean, like, that just always pops up. And I think I Am Nomad nailed it with that thread. Like, if you haven't read that thread, it's a good, breakdown of the article and how it doesn't have any new information. But yeah, it's just it's crazy because I mean, I've seen some stuff already talking about, USDC just released their audit or their information, and it didn't really include an audit. Like, there's nothing really about that. But yeah, I mean, Tether FUD with the price movement, it's just expected at this point. And like you're saying, I mean, they've been under subpoena for a long time now. That it would be absolutely nuts if they were really just doing these things that are claimed. So, I mean, just kind of expect it with price movement at this point.
Mm-hmm. And I guess last up, just a little neat piece of information. Publicly available Bitcoin nodes just recently hit over 10,000 for the first time, I think, since earlier this year. And so while this really is like only a small fraction of the total amount of nodes and isn't really a sight into the whole network itself, I mean, it is nice to see that number start ticking back up again, just because it does, at least in terms of full actual SPV nodes, spread the network load around a little more, and hopefully is an indication that people are actually using nodes for their transactions more and more. Because I'll probably say for the 100th time right now, like, you're not really helping anything just by running a node unless you actually use it. Like, nowadays, most air quote SPV wallets connect specifically to a single node ran by whoever's making that wallet and don't randomly connect out to random nodes. Like, the only two I can think of that actually do that right now off the top of my head are Bread Wallet and Green Address. And most of the wallets out there, like, just use a single node. So running a node you're not using isn't really helping the network to any kind of serious degree nowadays, with how SPV wallets have kind of changed how they worked. And so, Like, if you're going to run a node, use it. Otherwise, you're really just kind of burning CPU cycles for no good reason.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to add to this, in addition to the number of Bitcoin nodes growing, the network capacity of the Lightning Network is, the tweet that I initially saw was on November 17th, and it said that it was over $1.5 million worth of Bitcoin. I believe it surpassed $2 million within a day of that. I'm not sure what it is now, but it really grew really fast. It just reaching 1.5 million was doubling in a few days. So a lot of Bitcoin has been recently added to the Lightning Network, and so it has a lot of capacity, which was so funny because the whole the whole BCH fiasco was happening at the same time, and yet someone out there is putting or a bunch of someone's out there putting a ton of money onto the Lightning Network.
Yeah,
How do I long Lightning Network?
Dude, how do you long it? I just ordered all the gear for my Raz Blitz, man. That's how you long it. Just you want to get your node working and doing stuff. I'm going to be building one of these Raz Blitz, and I'm going to be hooking it to my node, hopefully opening some channels, doing some stuff. It's going to be cool, man. Tinkering around with the nodes is fun. Get yourself a Raz Blitz.
Very nice.
All right. I think that does round it up.
So into final thoughts, I guess. And today is a bring your own screen share because my laptop screen is crammed full of stuff right now.
I'll let you go first.
I don't know if I'll be able to screen share, but I'll just say that this is 2 tweets. The first one is from Laurent MT on Twitter. He made a tweet on November 17th that he has a new beta feature for OXT, which is called WAS squared. We are all Satoshi as a service. And the reason he made this thread of jokes about that is because Craig Wright is still trying to, I believe he tried to register the @Satoshi Twitter account, and it subsequently got banned for impersonation. Because he was trying to do more of this whole signature releasing faulty signatures of messages that aren't actually, verifiable. And he tried to claim SegWit has a catastrophic bug that will destroy Bitcoin at the end of 2019. It's very specific. He knows exactly when Bitcoin is going to die due to a specific bug. I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that he keeps claiming things are going to happen in the future and then they never happen, but he just wants people to be scared for a long time. So I would also recommend for anyone who doesn't know how to distinguish a real authenticated signed message or hash from a fake Toshi forgery, you should check out, I think his name is Merch on Twitter, and he posted something from the Bitcoin Stack Exchange explaining how to distinguish those. So you should check those out.
No, don't check it out. Otherwise, I won't be able to get you to believe that I'm really Satoshi. And that if you just send me 1 Bitcoin, I'll be able to use that to brute force access to my wallet.dat file that I lost the password for back in 2009.
But see, Shinobi, the thing that really proves that I'm Satoshi is the fact that it took me a whole day to do work to buy my watch.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to stay private. So
watch that thing on your phone.
Some of us use, classic or traditional devices, Shinobi.
What's that? I don't know what you're talking about.
It's a mechanical clock on your wrist.
What does mechanical mean?
Ask Mr. Wanker.
All right, man. So my final thought, I just wanted to talk about for a second this past weekend at CU. I went back up there because they were having another event, and I just wanted to kind of comment on it because I think it's kind of exemplified some progress we're making. Last year I went there to a similar event, and everything was being crammed into blockchains as much as possible. And when I went up there, one of the first projects I talked to they were kind of like down and out, but they were saying that they had been working hard all weekend and finally came to the conclusion that they didn't need a blockchain. And I was just like, I like raised my head. I just like said, thank God, like, you know, and then I kind of got into it and talking to them with their project. And it was still interesting. And like, really, they just needed a little bit of a course correction and kind of understanding, you know, the way we can evolve the ecosystems. But, you know, yeah, there's just a lot going on here in Colorado. Like I said earlier in the show, we elected a governor that's, you know, crypto friendly, and there's a lot going on as far as developments. And I've been keeping up with this Colorado blockchain Slack, and there's a lot of stuff going on in there. And you know, if you're one of those guys that really kind of has a lot of free time on your hand and you're wondering how you can help the network, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's being moved forward here in Colorado. If you could maybe join that Slack and try to help clear up the FUD, that would be helpful. But, you know, don't waste your mind share if you're working on something else. And just a final thought is tomorrow is Thanksgiving. You know, we celebrate that here in the United States, and I'm sure they celebrate it elsewhere too. It's just a day to look back and be thankful for the things that you got here. And yeah, I mean, you know, I'm going to try and get out and go climb a mountain tomorrow. Thankful for being healthy. So, you know, find something to be thankful for and take advantage of it tomorrow and, you know, think about it.
All right, no para. What's your final thought?
So you guys might have been sad or even desperate that the price is down, but you cannot deny that this Hashwar is priceless.
All right, and my final thought is for all of you people hoping for fungible and private Bitcoin, well, too bad. I'm going to actively attempt to undermine it the whole time I'm here. Yeah, that's right. This developer is not going to get much development done until I go home.
That's not true.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll
I'm
see.
sorry. I'm just laughing at Janine's screen. She's got that ass sculpture up again.
Alrighty, guys. Well, I guess it has been fun, but it is quite late for me, unusually right now. So I guess I'm going to try to get to bed. And toodaloo, everybody. We will see you Sunday/Monday, depending on which of us you're talking about.
By the way, that was the venue for the next BCash conference.
Yeah, be sure to keep that popcorn popping later, everyone.
Go back
Adios.
to the shithole from whence you came, Craig.
Bye-bye.